because I think it had some real just insights and takeaways for those of us who are on a path to mastery in our lives or in our businesses. And it's something that happened with me and my 5-year-old daughter, Londyn. If you know me, you know that in the human design system, I'm a projector, which means I get a lot of help. Sometimes I even like to joke that Londyn has her own whole staff. It's why I had to crank up my success in my business when she came to me, so that she could have a live-in au pair, a part-time nanny, full-time school, a country club with a kids club, all of those things. And as we're in the process of moving to Portugal, which you also may know about me, may not, but now you know, I'm moving to Portugal in about 8 weeks from the Bay Area of California. Our We've had to part ways with our au pair, in a very peaceful, lovely way, but we've had to part ways. She's moved in with another family as we get ready to pack it up and move to Europe. And Londyn cried. So the day that the au pair, I tried to prep Londyn for this to happen. She didn't really quite catch it. I don't think she really knew what I meant until the day that the au pair should have come back home and did not come back home. And I know Londyn very well. So I had cleared my calendar that evening. I didn't go out to dinner like we normally would have on a Sunday night. We didn't plan to do anyone else. We didn't have anyone over. I just had a clear calendar and I needed it because she sat there and I sat her on my lap and she cried for about something like 80 or 90 minutes. She cried and she cried and she cried. She said it was the saddest day of her life. Now, Londyn's been through a lot. Um, so I don't think it's actually the saddest day of her life, but it was sad. And it was the saddest day of her life that she remembered. It was the first time her au pair had ever not come back. So it was really sad to her. And I did what we do in what I think of as respectful parenting, as a philosophy. I just sat there and held her. And I held space for her to feel whatever she wanted to feel, whatever she needed to feel. And I validated that her feelings were right and okay, whatever they were, because they are. I didn't try to, give her ice cream to make her happy or talk her out of it. I just sort of sat there and held her and validated her. And I was prepared to do that as long as she needed me to do that. She cried for about an hour and Boohoo cried. And I was like, I know, it's sad. It's so sad, huh? You want Snee to come back home, don't you? Um, and then she wanted to eat, but she was still crying while she was eating. We found a burger place with a gluten-free bun, and she was really into it. So she was like eating her burger and crying. And I just held her and I was like, just prepared. She could cover me in snot. She could cover me in food. It didn't matter. She just kept crying, and eating and talking and blubbering. And I was like, yeah. And about 75 or 80 minutes in, she was still crying and she was still eating, but she broke off a piece of her burger and she handed it to me. And it was a little like her way of saying, like, thank you for being here with me in this experience. And thank you for saying yes to my experience. And thank you for saying yes to my emotions. And thank you for saying yes to me, right? To all parts of me. So, Londyn, I know that Londyn is a sensitive being, and I don't mean that. I mean that actually as high praise. She has a super sensor. Her sensory perception the acuity of her sensory perception is greater than the average bear. She sees and feels and smells and feels in here emotionally a depth and a complexity of things that other people don't. And so if you know my work, you know that I care. I think there is a great recalibration underway, and what's being recalibrated in our world, and we're on the leading edge of it. Me and you, by virtue of being here with me, are on the leading edge of it. And what's being recalibrated is what we think success is. All right. So I'm going to talk a lot about this coming up here soon, but success, the only two things that make up success are that you know your true sacred self and love your true sacred self enough to create a life that is congruent with that true self. And for some of us, that life includes a business, a kind of business I call the empire of your soul. For some of us, it's just like, it's literally just to know and love yourself and to master what I call self mastery. Has nothing to do with doing these self discovery systems and learning your attachment styles and your Myers Briggs and your sacred money archetypes and your human design and trying to judge or change or contort or force or, work on that. No, self mastery is loving all of those parts of you, all of those energies of you enough to get radical about pushing back on what other people, on external validation and the cultural narratives of success so that you create what works for you. So when I do that work with my clients, it's the same thing that I'm doing with Londyn. It's the same thing that I do with my own inner child, right? You must come to know your true sacred self, your big self, the self before conditioning, before fear, right before all of that nonsense comes on the scene. So it's important for me with Londyn to teach her these things about herself and to teach them to her in a way that they get, so that she knows that I respect all of her wiring, all of her energies, all of her emotions, whether they are convenient for me or not, in a way that we preserve her access to the full range of her emotions for her lifetime. All right. I want her to know herself. I want her to know that she's a super sensor. So I tell her this. I was talking with a client the other day about this client's relationship with her mother, and she's telling her mother about her business, and the mother was very harsh and very like, that's crazy, you're taking risks. It was really the mother speaking from her own fear, which is wild because her mother has all this financial scarcity and the mother is actually very wealthy. My client is actually very wealthy. So I want her to know herself. I want her to love herself. I want her, so I have taught her. Oh, what I was telling this client was that when I work with people, when I used to work with people in their 20s and 30s, often they would think they had a self-worth issue. When you work with people mostly like I do who are in their 40s and 50s, they realize that often what they've had is actually a mother issue, because the voice of our mother when we are children is it so creates the pervasive relational template that we have with the world and with ourselves, that we actually hear our mother's voice as tapes in our own head that become our own self-talk. And we don't realize usually until we're in our 40s and 50s that that's actually not how we feel about ourselves. It's what we were told about ourselves a lot. So I figure if Londyn's going to acquire tapes, I'm going to make them be good, right? If it's going to be my voice that she hears, I want to say things to her over and over again that create give her a chance against the wild world and the wild west out there. So I teach her about herself. I teach her she's a super sensor. I say to her, you have a sensitive brain. That means you see things and understand things and feel things that other people can't. I say to her, you have a world-class brain, Lundy, right? Sometimes I teach her things about our identity as a family. I'll say, we are the figure it out family. If you run into Londyn on the street, you can ask her, what's your family? She'll say, we're the Queen family or we're the figure it out family. And that means thus and so, right? So I want her to know herself. I want her to understand. I want her to have the self-mastery that I want you to have, which is not to try to understand yourself so that you might, change yourself or even optimize yourself or even, work around yourself. No, it's to know yourself so well that you create a life that works for and calls forth the highest expression of yourself. All right. So, and the highest expression of yourself includes that you have access to your full range of emotions. All right. So it's important to me for Londyn to know how to let her painful emotion, how to embrace her painful emotions with open arms, how to move toward them and not away from them. I want her to know how to let energies move through her. I want her to know that her emotions are always giving us information and energy, information often about what to do, sometimes not, but often about what to do, and energy to do it, right? The reason you feel angry when your boundaries are violated is because that is the inborn, goddess given wiring system that you have to protect yourself and your boundaries. So if you get angry, that is giving you both information, boundaries have been violated, and energy to do something about that boundary violation and address it. All right. I want her to know that she is a sensitive tuner. I've seen Londyn, as I'm doing this Portugal process, I see her. I've been watching her in her various school settings, in her various lessons. And I see sometimes she gets really squirrely and like a little perpetual motion machine. My friend calls it shark mode, where she like all cannot stop moving because sharks don't stop moving. But I noticed she's not like that at music class. She's not like that at swim class. She's not like that in, one preschool setting, and she is in the other. And it's not always based on, whether it's more structured or they're asking her to do whatever, or whether it's rigid or not. It's based on the other energies in the room. So I want her to learn that she is a sensitive tuner. If she feels a certain way, that is saying something about the other people and their energies in the room. And she gets to use that as information about whether she wants to be in the room with those people or not. All right. So, and also from an attachment styles perspective, the attachment style psychologists say that we recreate in our adulthood. Usually they're talking about in our adult love relationships, romantic relationships, that we recreate the same relational template and energy that we had with our parents as children, right? So that's why you hear them talk about secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, disorganized, which is anxious and then avoidant, and then anxious and then avoidant attachment. I see this all the time with people's relationship with money. People can have secure, anxious, avoidant, or disorganized attachment with money. I see this all the time with people's relationship with their employees, their customers, who they magnetize in, who they don't, right? Who they are keeping away by simply not, calling themselves and what they actually are in their business, like the coach that never wants to be called a coach, right? So I know that what feels like home for her in terms of how I, as her mother, allow her to express her emotions and how I meet her there, that's going to create the template that lays the tracks for what she'll be attracted to in her love relationships. And I think in her relationship with money, in her relationship with her business, maybe in her relationship with herself, right? I never hear anyone talk about it. Maybe I'm creating this as I'm talking, but I definitely know people that have an anxious and avoidant relationship with their own big self and their own big dreams, right? So what I endeavor to do is to let her know that it's always okay for her to come to me for a shoulder to cry on. It's always okay. We will never try to make her feelings go away because I'm uncomfortable with them, right? And that is a template for secure attachment later in life. Securely attached people can be very deeply interdependent with each other, and they know that they should be able to count on each other to be a shoulder to cry on, to love in the true sense of the word, which includes affection and attention and appreciation, yes, but also includes just allowing you to be who you are and experience what you experience. All right. So, very, very often in my life coaching practice, my business coaching practice, my clients are stepping they're stepping out of their comfort zones and into a bigger version of themselves than they've ever been. And it's uncomfortable, right? Resistance sparks, fear sparks. If you've got unresolved childhood trauma, that sparks. Scarcity sparks, unworthiness sparks, right? That's why I love the kind of work that I do, is that it allows the work the creating of whatever dreams and goals and visions and intentions and aspirations you have in the way that we teach it and in my company Soul Tour, um, it acts a little bit like spiritual highlighter, right? Where the business you're creating, the life you're creating, that is the life you were born to live, as you take these natural next steps to create it, it puts spiritual highlighter on whatever's not in radical alignment with your true self so that you can align it, so that you can, recalibrate, so that you can actualize who you really are, so you can realign the various areas of your life. So when you feel, so it's what is common is for people to come into my practice, they start doing the work, and then that uncomfortable feeling arises, whether it's resistance, fear, inner critic, narratives, whatever. And they'll it's very common for me to get an email or a WhatsApp message being like, how do I make it go away? How do I make this feeling go away? And I will always remind them, this feeling is always a signal that you're doing something right, because it only comes up when you've stepped outside of your comfort zone and into your zone of expansion. So know that first. Secondly, you don't want it to go away. It is pointing to something. Our emotions, and especially our unwanted or painful emotions, always have a career they want to have within us, is how my teacher Dave Rico talked about it, right? And trying to make that feeling go away you deprives you of the value of the energy and the information those emotions are trying to bring you. And it's also, and more importantly, it's a judgment of yourself. It's a judgment that there's a part of you that you reject, that there's a part of you that you find disgusting or disdainful, that there's something about you, an energy within you that you're not okay with. So you shove it down into the long bag that we all drag behind us, to quote John Bly. And I think that the bag John Bly was talking about is the same bag Erykah Badu was talking about in in the modern hymn, Bag Lady, right? Bag Lady, you gonna miss the bus, right? You can't drag all that stuff, which is the most vital energy, includes the most vital energies you have around behind you. Let it out, right? So I teach a lot of tools for learning how to embrace all of your emotions with warm, open arms, learning how to say yes to all the parts and experiences of yourself, learning how to experience all that energy, metabolize your pain, let it have the career within you and do what it came here to do. Get yourself extract the meaning and the energy and the information you need from it, and let it pass. And if you do that, it passes fast, right? It passes fast. And that's the thing. If I kept telling Londyn not to feel the way she feels, she's a little bit of a ruminator, ruminating tendency anyway. So we would be talking about this for the next 3 months. Instead, that was Sunday and yesterday was Tuesday. And I had the au pair come back over just to say hi to her and let her know that, we still can have a relationship, even though that way of relating ended. That was a word for somebody. That pattern of our relationship ended. We still can have a relationship and just create a new thing. It's like the tool I teach called surfing the UGG. So surfing the UGG is a tool that just asks you just must know first that all human energies move in waves. They all start low, and they build to a crescendo, to a peak, and then they dissipate, right? If you do nothing, that's the wave. That's what happens. So most of us are used to trying to make our uncomfortable feelings go away. So when we see them coming, or we're right about here, we stop doing whatever it is that makes us feel that fear. But that's also all the stuff that will expand you in your life and in your business, right? And so you see people get into this lifelong, I see people get into this lifelong habit. Someone listening to this is in the lifelong habit of giving up just on the brink of their breakthrough. And it's a pattern. Especially you see it in generators and manifesting generators. You have the stair-step learning curve, and it feels like you're plateaued. It feels like you should give up. It feels like you should give up. You're right before your breakthrough, and people give up, right? So surfing the UGG just reminds you, you can surf that discomfort, because if you do nothing, if you just keep doing whatever you were doing to expand yourself and expand your business, the energy will rise to the peak of the wave and it will dissipate. It will go away, right? So I just wanted to share that story with Londyn and a little bit about how I think about preserving her access to the full range of her emotions, and how you can think about surfing the UGG of your own emotions when you're in a season of expansion or transformation too. All right. I love you. I'll see you soon.